Okay, so my name is Robert Thompson.
And I am Robert Thompson, Jr. or Senior as well.
Yeah, and this is my dad that I'm recording for this interview and for my English class. And so, your brisket, I've had it many times. It's very delicious.
Well, thank you.
How is it made? Like just a brief rundown.
Okay, briefly, the way it is, once you get a thawed brisket, I open it from the package. I trim much of the fat. I leave a 1/4 inch of fat on the back of the brisket. And then on the face, I trim most of the fat off. There's some fat that will not render during cooking. It's more of a hardened type fat, and I try to trim as much of that out as possible. Once this is completed, I do a mustard rub. This acts as an adhesion for the rub, the seasoning. So I take and add the mustard, lather it over it, not too thick. Then I come back with a little salt, a little pepper, a little paprika, onion and garlic powder, things of this nature, and give it a nice coat. Maybe a little chili powder to kick things up a little bit. Once that's finished, it's prepped and ready to go into the smoker.
That's awesome. And once it's in the smoker, how long do you usually cook it for?
Okay, so once it goes in the smoker, you're looking at, you want to set your temperature at 200 to 250 degrees, depending. I like to do mine a slower cook, which means a lower temperature. The idea is to keep that temperature running approximately the same throughout the cook. Now, I set it in, set the smoker at 200, and let it smoke. Every hour, once an hour, I take a mixture, which is, it's combined apple juice, apple cider vinegar, and a little Worcestershire. And I put this into a spray bottle. You want the spray bottle set on mist, so it mist it rather than a jet stream, which will, take off a lot of your rub. So once an hour, every hour, I mist it. Then around 5 to 6 hours, when the brisket starts to take on a nice bark, a dark brown color, I will check it with a thermometer for an internal temperature in the thickest part of the meat. And it should read between 165, 175 is generally the internal that I'm looking for. Once I have that, then I double wrap it with a large sheet of foil. And sometimes you have to, even with the large foil, combine two pieces together and fold a seam several times in order to ensure that it doesn't leak through. Then you do a double layer of foil similar to the first, and this gives it a double protection, so to speak. Then I will carefully remove the brisket using a couple of spatulas. You want to be real careful when removing it from the rack. This way it doesn't damage the bark. And you lift it, set it in the foil, and create somewhat of a boat with the foil. Once this is done, I do a mixture of a beef broth, a little more Worcestershire sauce, and anything else I may think might taste good, I find in the fridge in my condiment section. Mix this up and heat it up. And what I'll do is I'll pour this around the brisket inside of my foil bowl. Then I wrap the brisket tightly, seal it up, make sure it's nice and snug to the brisket, because at this point the bark's not coming off, it's pretty well adhered. Then I will slip this back into the smoker and allow it to cook until the internal temperature becomes around 190 to 205, preferably 205. And a lot of times you can, when you check it with your thermometer, if it slides in like butter, then you know you're pretty well set for a tasty meal.
That's cool. Sounds very like a very labor intensive cooking job.
It is, but I enjoy it thoroughly.
Yeah, I do too. It's
Yes.
very good.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. And So, what made you choose the certain ingredients that you use to season the brisket with before you put it in?
It's been a lot of excuse me, trial and error. I've tested different methods and different ways, and to see what tastes best. And luckily, I don't mind experimenting because I really love the taste of brisket. So the experimenting has been the fun part, and I've found a certain plan and recipe that works for me that everybody loves.
That's true. I can tell you that.
Thank you.
Of course. And how did you first learn to cook brisket? Like, how can you remember you first learned?
Well, a while back, I'll tell you, it was some years back, around 25 years, this is before you were born, I attempted to cook a brisket, and I tried to do it on an old smoky smoker, had no idea what I was doing, came out tough as a bear hide. I mean, there was flavor, but it was like chewing leather. So it never came out right. And then I would say about 4 years ago, I got a smoker, and I decided I was going to smoke a brisket. So I talked to some friends. I went to some cook-offs. I watched what they did, and somewhat figured it out on my own. And then I began. The first couple of briskets I did, weren't the best. But slowly as I progressed, they began to taste, better and better until we are where we are today.
That's cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
Of course. I didn't know that you went to all those cook-offs and those kind of what are they called? Cook-offs.
Smoke-off, yeah. Smoke-off, cook-off.
Yeah.
They do varieties of meats. But I wanted to watch and see, how it was done. And I have friends that have smoked briskets as well. And they said, the main thing is if you get it right, it comes out really good. And, to buy brisket at a barbecue place is just so expensive comparing to if you do it yourself. Then what products you have in it, and you put your own love and seasoning and finishing touches on it, and it's yours.
So, was there anybody who introduced you to a certain type of brisket that you like to cook often?
Well, not really. It's just what I've found in the supermarkets, but I have tried, standard briskets as opposed to I've come across one moment. I've come across some other briskets that are Angus, and I found that those actually can be more flavorful on the last couple that I've done. Actually, I'm looking into now doing what they call Wagyu beef, and I want to try a Wagyu beef brisket. Now, these briskets are about $150 for one.
Wow.
But it would be nice just to try it and see how it comes out. And I figure if I do it slow and low and do it right, it ought to be a really tasty meal.
It seems like that mostly all the time you do it.
Yes, thank you.
Unless, like you said, you were experimenting and like that one night that it was too salty.
Yes. Yes.
Little experimentation.
Right,
but
right.
It was still very good.
Well, I tell you, a Wagyu brisket, I can only imagine how tasty that would be. So one of these days when I have some extra money, which, then I'm definitely going to try it.
That'd be good. That'd be cool. And, so I know you grew up in Florida already.
Yes.
So, did growing up in Florida have any effect on your cooking or cooking style?
I've watched my dad do a little bit of smoking, but not really. I'm more self-taught. I do try to, with many of the things that I do cook, try to get that comfort food taste I remember from growing up, my mother's style of cooking, but really had nothing to do with briskets because we never really cooked that at home. It was always at a cook-off or at the fairgrounds or something like this that I would be able to have this.
So, so growing up not having it must have fueled your desire for it later on.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be a good assumption.
That's cool. It makes sense.
Yes.
And so I know you moved around a lot when you were younger. And what location do you think influenced your cooking the most?
I would say here in Galveston and in Houston as well. I had a roommate that cooked that taught me a few things, and then years ago, I have to whisper this because my wife's in the other room. A girlfriend. No one exists except for her, and she taught me numerous techniques with cooking to make food flavorful.
Cool. Why do you think Galveston and Houston was one of the best places you learned to you have recipes like yourself?
Well, there's so many barbecue places, and then trying the barbecue really inspired me to want to start cooking my own briskets, and went to a couple of cook-offs with a friend, and tried the brisket there, and it was incredible. And this brought my desire to be able to make one myself that I could be proud of.
That's cool. That's
Yes.
good. We could probably pause here for now. So, what influenced which type of smoker you prefer?
I started out with a Old Smoky, then I worked my way to a barrel smoker, which did not have a smoke box, and it was difficult to control the temperature. So I found a smoke box with a smoker that I could actually keep the fire in the burn box so that it wouldn't get too hot inside of the smoker. And this worked very effectively, and I used wood for a while. And then I found out about a pellet grill, found one at a great price, and decided I would try it. And once I started using a pellet grill, I was hooked. They're very effective, very efficient, and smoke a perfect brisket.
And what is the burn box or it?
It's a firebox, and that would be a place where I would keep my wood and burn, and it burns separate on the side of the barrel, and the smoke goes through the barrel and out of a smokestack, and that allows the smoke flavor to get onto the meat without a direct flame.
Ah, okay, that's cool. I see. And is there any better way to serve certain types of brisket when it's already cooked that makes it like kind of more flavorful?
Well, when one of the things I do when I'm serving brisket is the carving method is very much key. You want to carve across the grain and do, approximately 1/8 to 1/4 inch slices. And once you go across the grain, it gives it a nice tender flavor and breaks apart real easy. So this is generally how I do that. And another thing is separation. I learned from someone that separating the brisket is a lot of times a good way to serve it. And there's a fat section between the flat and the point. The flat is the thinner side of the brisket, which is more lean, and the point has a little more fat and a different texture to the meat. And between that is a layer of fat, and you can cut through that layer at an angle and separate the two. Then you can serve sliced flat brisket, which is a nice lean brisket, and you can chop up your point and turn that into barbecue sandwiches, things of this nature.
It's awesome. Yeah, I've had plenty of those barbecue sandwiches.
They are good.
Yeah, extremely. And is there any certain type of smoke flavors that you prefer? Which which type of wood or pellets you prefer to burn?
That's a good question. I prefer my number one smoke flavor, whether it be wood or pellets, would be the mesquite. Goes quite nice with the brisket. I've also used hickory and sometimes a little oak. Those flavors are really good for beef, and some of the other pecan is a really good one as well. But mainly, I like to stick to mesquite.
Yeah, I've had that a lot. It's getting a little rare in Texas, I've heard you say before, right?
Yeah,
or expensive at least.
Expensive, yes.
Yeah, thought so. So, you could pretty much say you've made your own original recipe through what you've learned through wherever you've been.
Absolutely. I have my own secret spices and certain things that I do with the brisket, which I feel makes it different from other people. And actually, hopefully, this is something I'm sure I'm going to pass on to yourself and the rest of my sons, and that way we can continue it as a tradition, and our grandkids and on down the road can enjoy what we've originally started to make.
Yeah, that's a good concept. Yeah, I mean, what I mean is, so really we didn't have much family tradition to go off brisket wise.
Right. Right, because my parents never smoked it really, and this is something that I guess originates with me, but will become tradition, I feel.
That's cool. I feel like that way too.
Well, thank you.
And my final question is, what is the main reason you love to cook brisket so much?
Because it's delicious. Absolutely delicious, and it's my favorite choice cut of meat. If cooked right, it's great.
That's good. Thank you for your time.
No problem.
Thank you, Dad. Love you.
Love you.